Hello and welcome back. So in this video I wanted to talk to you about why I prefer plastic miniatures. So I've got loads of minis, I've got loads of plastic ones and I've got loads of metal ones. On the whole I tend to prefer the plastic ones. These are metal, these are some plastic, but I've got hundreds of others. So I find that plastic minis tend to be, they're more modern, aren't they? Miniature wargaming started with the metal minis. Once upon a time you could buy kits with lumps of metal and a mould, and you could actually melt the metal down yourself, pour it in and make the minis yourself. And a lot of the original ranges were all done in metal. It was the beginning of the hobby, and so they were a bit clunkier, maybe some were a bit bigger. There's lots of flash on them. They're just not as sharp or as crisp as modern minis, which tend to be plastic can be. So I think the sculpts are sharper, and it's a more modern way of kind of doing it. They're cheaper. So when you look at them, so even Games Workshop, who are probably famous for having the most expensive minis, their minis, say, so for 20 quid, say maybe you're going to get about 10 to 30 plastic miniatures in a box. So even if you only get 10 for your £20, that's still only £2 a mini. Metal ones, you're looking at starting at £2 and going up from that. But then you look at some of the Perry's box sets or the Warlords box sets, or any number of other ranges. I mean, Plastic Soldier Company, their box sets, you get over 115mm minis for for 20 quid. You would never get anywhere near the same amount of figures in metal as you can do in plastic. So plastic minis are a lot cheaper. I think they take the paint better. I know that's up for debate a little bit, but with metal minis, you're finding that you have to wash off all the mould agent, mould release stuff. I know you get that on the plastic ones, but it tends to be worse, I've found, on the metal ones. Sometimes they need primers, they need varnishing because they're metal, they rub on your hands and stuff. So you tend to find you get shiny edges on some of the stiff edges on there. So they tend to need varnishing. So I think that plastic minis take the paint better. There's lots of spray cans and stuff that are designed for use on plastics. So I think they take the paint better. That's how I feel about it. Perhaps it's just my style. You might find it differently, especially if you've always had metal minis. But yeah, they take the paint better. They're easier to assemble. I think they're easier to assemble. Although I don't know, it's up for debate because metal minis tend to be fixed, so you're not as likely to have to stick arms and heads, although that is changing a little bit now because of the way they're sculpted. They tend to be sculpted on one plane, so everything is kind of in a line like that, so they can fit in the mould and be taken out, whereas plastic ones are done in lots of bits and you stick them all together. So you could argue that metal ones are easier to assemble because they tend to have fewer parts. But what I mean by that is with plastic ones, because you use your polystyrene cement, it actually melts the plastic together, and the way that you tend to have sort of 20 or 30 minutes time, you can kind of manipulate it a little bit so you can get different poses and stuff. It gives you a bit more room for error, whereas if you're using metal minis, you've got super glue. Once you've stuck them, they're stuck, and quite often if you've got a bigger model, sometimes you have to drill and pin them, which is a bit of a pain, to be honest. There's a little bit of skill required with that. So I think plastic minis are more forgiving, and because they're more forgiving, I'm going to say they're easier to assemble. I started off as a model maker, so maybe lots of models, airplanes and tanks, whatever, are plastic, so perhaps it's just where I've come from, but that's how I feel about that. They can be customised. So, for example, a metal mini, what you get in the blister pack is kind of what you got. You can maybe you've got arms and bits and pieces. You can alter the angle of the arm perhaps, or rotate the head a little bit, but pretty much what you've got is what you've got. But with plastic ones, with a little bit of skill, just like this guy, for example, this little Japanese archer. He doesn't exist as such on the instructions, but it wasn't that hard to trim the plastic a little bit. I know it's not focusing very well. It wasn't very hard to trim the plastic a little bit and just get him to have a slightly different pose. So for example, let's find another archer. This guy's exactly the same sprue, exactly the same parts, looks miles different to this guy. But if they were metal, chances are they would look the same. And just so you know, I'm not sort of what I'm getting at. These two French Foreign Legion guys, exactly the same pose. And see how, what I mean by they're linear, they're all down the one line. So what you got is what you got. So you end up with a unit where half the guys look the same. Whereas with plastic, you can do a little bit of work, not a lot of work, and you can make them look quite different. And like I say, with the polystyrene glue, you've got the opportunity to manipulate them a little bit, which is kind of cool. So they can be customised. I think they're harder to damage and easier to fix. If I drop, I'm not going to do it, I know you're going, oh, go on, drop it. If I drop a plastic mini, chances are it'll bounce and it won't break. If I drop a metal mini, there's quite a lot of weight in there. It might not break, because obviously metal's quite tough, but the guns will bend and things like that. And once a gun does bend, or once a gun on a metal mini breaks, it is a right pain to fix it, because it's such a small part. You can super glue it, but it's always going to be weak there. Super glue is not the greatest, doesn't do particularly well with different extremes of temperature. So if you're transporting them somewhere, going in and outside and things like that can affect them. When I got all these French dudes from Warlord, half of them, when I opened the box, the gun barrels are broken off and I had to fix them. Not a massive thing, but that doesn't happen on a sprue. You get a sprue and it's on a frame, they're kind of fixed in place, they're a lot safer. And I'm always conscious if I drop any of these guys. I mean, he's actually got a barrel from a musket from a completely different range, a plastic musket, because it was broken and the barrel weren't even in there. So I know I could phone them up and go for all that aggro, but you just fix it, didn't you? So yeah, so I don't think they're as durable. If a plastic mini does break, you can fix it with super glue at the game that you're at, and then once you get home you can sort of do a better repair job with polystyrene cement, which, like I say, doesn't just form a glue like super glue does. It actually melts and welds it back together. So I think it's better. And I'd say there's more variety due to options. So we've hit on that already. If you've got a unit made up of plastic miniatures, you can make, even though they're all riflemen, you can make each one like a personality of its own, make each one a little bit different. If you've got metal minis, you're stuck to the sculpt that comes in it. So they all look the same. So I've already shown you these, but these French Foreign Legion guys, I painted these over the weekend. There's only 3, there's 8 of them all together, but there's only 3 different sculpts. There's a rifleman like that, 3 of those guys. There's rifleman like that, there's 4 of those guys, and there's the NCO, one of those guys. So I've got a unit of 8 men, and there's only 3 different sculpts. Whereas if you look at something else, I don't know, let's say these Perry's Agincourt, I think they're Agincourt Knights or Water Roses or something. Oh shit, yeah. So there's 3 of them, all spearmen, all from the same kit, all look different. You see what I'm saying? So you can make a unit of 12 of these dudes up and they all look completely different. Now, here's another 3 of them. They all look different again. There we go, see? So it don't really take much effort to make things a bit of variety, and when they're all on the tabletop in mass ranks, it does look kind of cool when they're all a little bit different rather than all looking the same. That's how I feel about it anyway. I know I'm sort of, there are people that are strong advocates for metal minis, but hey, I wanted to let you know how I feel about it. So let me know how you think about it. Stick a comment in the doodah underneath if you want, or whatever. But there's some thoughts on the matter anyway. So take care, and I'll see you again for another Wargames ramble. Probably going to do the review of the new bolt action thing next. So new bolt action D-Day book. So keep an eye out for that anyway. Take care. See you later. Bye bye.